Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me this morning on JSlay Made in the USA, where we explore truth, expose deception, and inspire courage in our fellow man. Guys, if you have not yet followed me on Rumble on my Warrior Mind, Body, and Soul channel, I'm going to be posting this video there as well, and I hope you'll come over there and follow that channel, because that's where I'm going to have a focus on men, masculinity, and fighting for really our boys, our young men, and getting them back to who they're meant to be, back to who their heart is. So follow me on Warrior MBS on Rumble. With that being said, guys, I'm so excited about our guest today. Ryan Michler is the founder of Order of Man. He's the founder of the Order of Man podcast, the Iron Council, which is their tribe of men that are going together toward greatness and toward refining their hearts. And also, he has a best-selling book, The Masculinity Manifesto, which I just finished this morning. Fantastic book. And Ryan, I'm very excited about this conversation. Let's get it on, brother.
Right on, man. I've been looking forward to it. So glad to be joining you today.
Yeah. I'm honored to have you. I've been following your podcast for a long time, and I can't wait to get into some of these topics, because men and masculinity in particular is under attack, as you well know, probably better than anyone. And some of that is from the government. So to kind of kick things off, the big news right now is the midterm elections. And I have sensed from you in your podcast, be it the guests that you bring on or some of the topics you cover, there's a little bit more of an emphasis on culture and politics now than maybe 5-6 years ago. So I guess my first question would be, what do you think about the election last night? And, is there any kind of news there you'd want to discuss? And then second, what do you think about the attacks on masculinity from our government itself right now?
Yeah, I mean, regarding the midterms, I think that everybody is surprised. The polls kind of showed that there might be this red wave coming in. And I think the phrase that's being tossed around this morning is the red mirage, where it just didn't pan out the way that a lot of people, including professional pollsters, thought it would. I'm not sure why that's the case, but it's disheartening. It's unsettling, frankly, to know that we're in such a dire position within the country. And yet we keep electing the same officials who are responsible for getting us into these positions, specifically with regards to COVID lockdowns and measurements. The economy is horrific with inflation and the stretching of our dollars. I just paid a tax bill yesterday that was a serious kick in the nuts. It's infuriating. And then we just keep Pennsylvania looks like they're going to elect a man who is literally brain damaged. I don't say that with any ill will towards the man himself. I don't agree with his policy, but I'm certainly not making light of his situation. But he is brain damaged. Yeah, and we keep electing these officials. I don't understand. Here in Maine, the three major races, there was a House seat available, a Senate seat available, and then of course our governorship all went Democrat. It's hard in Maine. Mostly the coastal cities, the large coastal cities are very blue, and they control a lot of the election results relative to our rural areas, which I'm in, which tend to lean in favor red. So it's an unsettling time, to say the least. Yeah,
no doubt about it. And some of it, it begs that question that people don't want to ask, especially in the mainstream, because you'll get, people will roll their eyes at you. And is it actually a free and fair election? Which that's a story for another time. But on your remarks there regarding, there's things that work, there's things that we know that work, and then there's things that we know that don't work. And I'm a sports guy. I was a baseball player until I was 30 years old, played professionally and all that. And I know one thing in sports: if you perform well, you succeed. You're put on the field because they want what works. And if somebody comes along with, as a ball player, say with a hitting theory, you may listen to it, but if it doesn't work, you're going to discard it pretty quickly because your career's at stake, right? But it seems like in American culture, we see the opposite thing happening. Bad ideas with negative results that we can see in real time, crime, for instance, those ideas are promoted and supported, while the good ideas are squashed and solid performance is hidden. And a great example would be like a Ben Carson. He would be a model of, he came from the ghetto, became a neurosurgeon based on just hard work, drive, will, incredibly smart guy, by the way, as well. But, they're taking his names off of the high schools in Detroit, where he's from. So I'm using him as an example of squashing great models of success. My question is, how do you think we have gotten to this point where in culture we're actually rewarding and promoting things that we know do not work?
I really think it comes down to ignorance. That's really what it is. Oh, well, I guess it's not the only thing. I will say ignorance and indifference. There's so many people who are ignorant to these power hungry, greedy politicians who want nothing more than to keep themselves in power and keep their constituents enslaved and trapped and bonded to them. The other side of it is indifference. So many people are jaded, to put it mildly, with the election process, with the whole political circus and theatrics, that they've just thrown up their hands and said, I'm not dealing with it anymore. And I can understand that position.
Right.
I don't think it's the right position to take, clearly, but I can certainly understand why somebody might feel that way. So, yeah, I think when you couple ignorance, just uneducated, not knowing, and then just hoping somebody's going to solve your problems, with indifference, you start to see the results that we've seen. And it's not pretty for anybody.
Yeah, no doubt about it. 10 years ago, your message, whether it be in your books or just, your overall theme of we need to get back to real masculinity, the positive aspects of masculinity that can drive us toward success as a society, get us to have stronger marriages, that the whole bit. Today, there is a multi-pronged attack on that. And you being a leader in that field, you're probably in the crosshairs. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, have you felt, I know you may not care, but have you felt pushback and where from? What kind of pushback have you seen?
Very, very little pushback. Maybe I'm just not to the level where I would receive that on a larger scale, but yeah, occasionally I'll have a wild Instagram comment or a direct message that might, say some negative things about me, but I don't really consider that pushback. There hasn't been much more than that. But if you look at bigger figures, guys like Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, I think, has a book coming out on masculinity or men in general. Senator Josh Hawley, I believe, I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me, but someone does have a book again on masculinity coming out. These guys are going to take the brunt of that just because of their notoriety and their popularity. But I get very little pushback. Most of the people that listen to our podcast or read our books or tune into what we're doing do so because they wholeheartedly believe in it. Right. And they've implemented some of the practices and some of the lessons and theories and examples that our guests have shared. And it's turned out favorably. And what's interesting is if you look at my statistics, the demographics of the people that we have on social media or our email list or who read our books, usually you're going to find about 15 to 20% of our audience is female, which was very interesting. We're called Order of Man. I talk exclusively to men, and yet 15 to 20% of our audience across any platform is women. And these are women who want to find real men who honor, appreciate, and respect real men who are stepping up and leading effectively. These are also mothers, single mothers with boys who don't have a masculine presence in their sons' lives. And they're trying to figure out how to raise their boys. Yep. So, men and women alike really do appreciate our message if they're willing to dive into it and see what it's about, which is service. Frankly, if we strip everything else away, it's about teaching men to become better servants to their family members, to their friends, employees, communities, etc.
Yeah. And who really in the right mind is going to have a problem with that?
Usually what happens is they misinterpret the message and think it's misogynistic, or they see a picture of me, hunting with one of my children and they think I'm barbaric. But if you really dive into it and spend any amount of time looking at what we're talking about, it's all there to lead, to serve, to be good men.
Right. Well, it's interesting you brought that up about women. I've run across a few polls lately and even mainstream articles talking about since the big push of the feminist movements and women focusing on career over, family life to some degree. And, and it's all written from a very liberal perspective, but they're scratching their heads wondering, and I'm going to pull up a little graphic here. Now, don't worry about the way it's defined where it says liberal men, liberal women. It's basically showing what's the overall happiness level. It says completely satisfied with life by sex and ideology. Conservative men, conservative women are showing a higher level of overall life happiness, whereas liberal men and liberal women are showing a less. And the reason I say let's not focus on whether it says liberal, conservative, what this poll is going off of is an academic poll that was talking about women who they were measuring them back in the 70s, and before all of the what would you say, just the feminist push toward women's equality at work and, more work hours, that whole thing. They were actually happier in the 70s than they are today. Do you think that could be a response or not a response, but you think that could be kind of a result of women starting to figure it out? Like they're starting to see, like, maybe this whole thing with us going out and trying to be totally independent and not being as focused on traditional gender roles, that's actually not making us happier.
I mean, it could be. I don't know. I haven't poured over that research or that data or that chart in specific, but it certainly could be. And I know that there are plenty of women who are jaded with going out into the workforce and being fed this lie that they need to go out and act like men in order to be equal to or worth being in society. What's interesting though about that is when and we'll say liberal and conservative just for the sake of argument, the liberal side of the equation tends to say that women should go out into the workforce and they should compete and they should make themselves skilled in the market. Which, okay, that's fine. But the issue that I take is that this liberal side of the equation will really mock and ridicule and undermine and belittle a woman who decides consciously that she's going to stay at home and she's going to be a housewife and a homemaker. But you never see a conservative, not never, but generally speaking, on the conservative side of the aisle, I don't poke at any woman who decides to go out into the workforce. Like if that's what she wants to do, then by all means, go out and be the best and do what you have to do. But I think there is value and honor in staying at home and turning your house into a home and being there for your children. And I think that's a worthy ambition. That's a worthy
100%.
calling. It's noble. It's not any less, certainly. I think the other reason, though, you might see that equation the way it is, liberal versus conservative, is the general concept of victimhood mentality. I think the liberal side of the aisle tends to paint themselves as victims, and the politicians who lead that side of the aisle perpetuate that lie that they're the victim of some circumstance. And that would make me miserable if I'm a victim of something, versus the conservative side of the aisle that says, generally, you're not a victim. Sure, you have a different set of cards than somebody else, but we've created a pretty powerful and amazing opportunity for you to get ahead in life, whatever that looks like to you, despite your circumstances and your situation. So it's one of hope and optimism versus doom and gloom on the victim side. So of course, that's going to make people angry, upset, unhappy.
100%. I was brought up with a dad that believed in hard work, and my father was around, which was a big point in my favor to begin with. I think it's one of the biggest problems facing society is absent fathers. But my dad always taught me, Jeremy, be a victor, not a victim. Don't just decide you're going to be a victim of circumstance. Find ways that you can turn your stumbling blocks into a stepping stone and step up, man, rise to the occasion. And I think you nailed it. Like when we are told we're victims, go find somebody that can rescue you. Oh, maybe that's the government, or maybe that's, something that's out there outside of yourself. Your message has been very much like, no, you've got the tools within you. And part of that is your masculinity. Part of that is the strength that comes from within a man. That should be driving you to overcome those obstacles, which is kind of what a man is made to do. Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I talk a lot about masculinity being amoral. There's one side of the camp that typically says masculinity is inherently toxic, it's destructive, it's dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. The other side of the aisle tends to say, well, masculinity is good. They're actually both sides of the aisle are wrong. Masculinity is neither good nor bad. It's amoral. It just is. Because if you actually look at what the definition of masculinity is, it's a set of characteristics, behaviors, traits that are developed and created through our biological makeup. That's all masculinity is. And so we can use the propensity for violence, for example, to really do some horrific things to people. And many people have. But you can also use your propensity for violence to righteously defend what is yours. So it's not a matter of if it's bad or good. It's a matter of how you wield the tools that are available to you, how you hone them, refine them, practice them, and serve other people that really define you, not as masculine, but as a man, right? We know people that we see, whether we vocalize it or not, we say, that guy's manly. Mm-hmm. Why do we say that? We say that because he's maybe got some business acumen. We say that because he's empathetic and kind to other people when he doesn't have to be. We say that because he serves his community. Like everybody has this vision of what a man is. They don't say, oh, that guy's masculine or that guy's a male. They say, oh man, that's manly. That guy's manly,
How
right?
does
That's refined masculinity.
one thing I totally agree. One thing I think of as well, though, when you're saying, man, that's a man, something that I don't even have to verbalize it. I just feel it when I'm around a man that owns themselves. They're very confident in who they are. It doesn't come out necessarily or at all in a boastful way. I mean, not the locker room type of, cockiness, but more just like this self-owning confidence. How does that play into what you're talking about with a man?
Well, confidence is earned. So one thing you're referring to is ego or arrogance or excessive pride.
Right.
Those things aren't earned. They're typically manufactured. So a guy will walk with his head up and his chest puffed out and, talk about himself a lot and try to get the accolades and notoriety from other people. And that's all manufactured. He's making that up. And a lot of people can see right through that. But then you have the X factor. I think that's what you're referring to. You see a
Yes.
guy who comes to the table and he's got it. Like, I don't know what it is, but he's got it. And it's hard to quantify. It's confidence.
Yeah.
It's been earned. He's had battles and he's banged up and he's scarred up and he's emerged victorious. He's overcome his challenges. He's overcome his addictions. He's built relationships. He's built empires. He's got money in his bank account. He serves other people. He's so convicted about who he is and how he's showing up. When you have skeletons in the closet, people can see that. They may not know what the skeletons are, but they can see it because there's little cracks, there's little chinks in the armor.
Yeah.
But when you don't have any skeletons in the closet because you have owned everything, including the negative side of the way that we show up at times, man, that's a guy who's going to be confident and everybody's going to be drawn to that kind of individual.
One of those cracks in the armor. I was addicted to several things there for a few dark years after my baseball years. And we all have our excuses for why we find ourselves in those places. But I just got into a dark place. And during that time, I was so self-focused. I was always thinking, okay, how can I present this version of myself so nobody sees that addiction that's hanging in the background and drawing me down? And I think that leads into that ego and that manufactured arrogance that you're talking about. And a lot of people at that time really didn't enjoy being around me because I was always trying to prove myself, even though I didn't have to. Do you see that a lot with the men that you're around?
Well, you say I was trying to prove myself, and the way that you said it made it sound like you were trying to prove yourself to other people.
Yes.
And we tend to do that when we don't feel good about who we are.
Right.
So we look in the mirror and we know about intimately familiar with all of our inadequacies and deficiencies. And rather than deal with them, we present ourselves in a way where we hopefully can trick and fool and manipulate other people into believing that we're better than we actually are. And then that external validation, we crave that because we can't internally validate ourselves. So in order to fill that void, I need the praise. I need the accolades. I need the notoriety. I need the clicks. I need the likes. I need the sales. I need all of that because that's validating me in spite of my deficiencies. The problem with that is external validation goes away. People leave, people die, people go through divorces, you lose your job. Like all the ways that we define ourselves externally goes away. What never goes away is you and the man staring back in the mirror at you. Mm-hmm. You always have to sit with that individual. So if we can learn to internally validate ourselves through our efforts, so what we do is we identify our deficiencies and inadequacies, and then we work to shore them up. And then I don't need your validation, Jeremy. It doesn't matter to me if you have me on your podcast or not. It doesn't matter to me if you buy my book. It doesn't matter to me if you say great and wonderful things about me or horrific things, horrible things about me. Yeah. It doesn't matter because I can look at the guy in the mirror and feel pretty confident. Not that I have it all figured out, but that I'm working on it. And that internal validation is way more potent. It's way more powerful than anything you, Jeremy, could ever give to me.
Yeah, I 100% see that. Tell us a little bit about your journey, Ryan, because you mentioned in the book that you lost 50 pounds. I know that you moved to Maine. You haven't always lived there. There was some big life changes. And I'm assuming that occurred along with your growth as a man and stepping into this mission that you have now. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your journey of even the confidence you gained from the initial podcasting days and leaving your financial planning job to today, the whole bit?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was a big change. In 2015, I launched this podcast that I have now and movement called Order of Man. And at the time, I was running a financial planning practice and doing moderately well. I wasn't knocking it out of the park necessarily, but I wasn't broke either. We were doing decent. And I got really tired of having the same long drawn out conversation about money. And I always felt compelled to do something more meaningful, more significant. Not that that wasn't, but it just wasn't calling to me the way that I felt like something should. And I was doing a podcast with my financial planning practice at the time and realized I love the medium of podcasting. I like being behind this microphone. I like sharing a message that helps people, but I didn't want to have that conversation. So I launched this podcast, Order of Man, really with the goal of having conversations with powerful men, guys like yourself. They've had success in different endeavors, whether it's their athletic career or their other career pursuits, or as scholars, as authors, as warriors. And I thought, man, if I can just have conversations with these guys, then I can improve myself. So it was very selfish, very selfishly driven. And I'm blown away. I still think about it. We had success almost immediately. And I don't think it was a testament to anything I was doing. I think it was a testament to the fact that people wanted this. They wanted to hear, men specifically, wanted a resource, wanted an avenue, wanted a place where they could learn how to be better men, how they could serve their families and their communities and their businesses and friends and all of that. And we happened to be in the right place at the right time. And I'll tell you what, regarding the path that you had said, I'm still on the path. And I find myself taking 2 or 3 steps forward and I'm feeling really good about things. And then I get kicked in the nuts and, I take a step backwards or, fall off the ledge and got to pull myself back up on the path and get going again. So it's not linear. I wish it was in a lot of ways. That would be easier. You say you lose 50 pounds. I'm like, well, yeah, sure. I lost 50 pounds and then I put, 30 back on and now I'm down another 20. It's like, it's this accordion effect. I hate that I do this. We all do it. It's like you look yourself in the mirror and you're like, man, I really need to work on my body, or my business is struggling or my bank account's struggling. So I really need to focus on that. And so we start implementing the right things. And then lo and behold, life improves, right? Your body gets better. You get more energy. You start paying off some debt. You're feeling pretty confident with your financial situation. And then we set cruise control. Like, I'm good. Right. I'm good now.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, life and temptations and the enemy and stuff just happen. Random circumstantial events just happen. And we find ourselves in the same dang pit that we were 3-4 years ago. It's like, what am I doing? Why can't I stay on this path? So for me, the podcast has been powerful, not only because I know how good we're doing and how much we're serving other people, but it's a constant reminder for me personally, what I need to be doing on an hour by hour basis to ensure that I don't continue to slip like I have in the past.
Sure. I know the feeling of learning from your own guests that you're bringing on. It's a constant education. When I mentioned your path, and I totally get that we're all still on the journey, we've never arrived. For me, there were a few key things, and maybe this isn't your story at all. I just figured, hey, 50 pounds, that's a pretty serious, change. For me, I had some serious addictions that I had to get honest about and kick to the curb. And that was a process. It took a brotherhood of men and some trusted people. It took me getting honest with my wife and getting through that time. Everything else began to change with it. My body changed with that. It was like, I don't know. It was the opening up point to a lot of things happening that changed. So anyway, I just thought there might've been like one thing back there. You're like, I really had to get past this in order to get to where I am today.
I mean, I years and years ago, I had a separation with my wife, and that was very challenging. That was a big struggle for me, and realized, man, I was not in the right place, not doing the right things. So that was a big catalyst for change for me. For me, it's not usually anything catastrophic. It's usually just a gradual decline, and I wake up one day and I'm like, what? How come my pants don't fit anymore?
Yeah.
That's
true of so many men. Well, you mentioned, you said, when you started the podcast, it was very selfish. It just seemed like something you really wanted to do, yet it's speaking to people, it's serving people. I'm guessing you had a sense that there was a need in society though, as well, for these kinds of bold conversations.
There was to a degree. I would talk about things in my life without my dad being around and him not being in the picture. I talked about the separation I had with my wife. And the more I talked about these hardships that I went through, I would have guys that are like, oh, yeah, I went through that. And I went through a divorce, or, my dad was out of the picture, or my dad beat me when I was a kid. And so they would share these things. I'm like, oh, my goodness. We have all of these struggles and challenges in life as men. I think women inherently do it fairly well, generally, but guys don't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't. We talk to each other about sports and the game and all kinds of stuff, but we don't talk about these real deep and meaningful type things. And so when I realized how many people were struggling with very similar issues that I was like, this is interesting. Everybody has these problems and nobody's talking about them. So what if I started talking about it? And you can see the result of that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I want to beat up on the APA for a minute. Now, this may seem like it's coming out of left field, but you take a minute in your book to talk about the American Psychological Association. I'm intimately familiar with this, and you wouldn't know this, but after my period of addiction and all that, and coming through it, and my life getting so much better, I was like, gosh, I need to be a counselor. So I was considering leaving my sales career and becoming a full-time counselor. So I went to this university. And it was a Christian university, Grand Canyon University. Within 4 classes, I dropped out. I made A's in every class, but we hit the ethics class. It was so woke and so based on, basically it just read like a Democratic Party handbook. I couldn't believe what they were teaching me at this Christian university. And I began to look into, okay, why would they be teaching me this stuff? And I found the answer. It was in order to keep their accreditation, which is what they value. That's how they promote themselves. The counseling school and most universities, we got to keep our accreditation. Well, all of that comes from the APA at the end of the day. And I want to read you 2 things. So back in 1963, read into the congressional record, there were 45 goals of communism in America as read into that record. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, here they are. I'm going to read 2 of them. So number 39 was dominate the psychiatric professions and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist goals. The next one was discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. So those 2 things have definitely happened. And as I researched the APA and I looked up how many members of each sex are in it, and I found a New York Times article that said almost 90% of the APA is now female, 10% are male. And yet they are
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible. So I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts real quick. I don't even have a great question there. I'm just amazed that you brought it up in your book. I had done some research on that and I was like, we've got to talk about this.
Well, this is a multifaceted attack, and a lot of it's coming from government. That's an entity that is promoting this attack or dismissal of masculinity. You have education, which is also associated with the government, who are doing this, and then you have the medical community, and specifically the American Psychological Association. They did a study, and I can't remember the year right offhand. I quote it in my book. And it was not that long ago. It's probably within the last 4 years or so, where they deemed masculinity. I'm paraphrasing here, but this is pretty close. Masculinity as inherently destructive, dangerous to our young men. And specifically, they pulled out 4 characteristics that we would generally consider masculine behaviors: dominance, competitiveness, stoicism, and aggression.
Which are 4 chapters in your book, by the way.
Right, because I wanted to address that and let people know that those aren't inherently negative. Competition, you're telling me that healthy competition is inherently negative, or stoicism, which is basically understanding the comprehension of your emotions, is negative? Like, help me understand how you come to that conclusion. But this is the body, this is the governing agency that's making recommendations for the way that we treat our young men. And it's not surprising to me that this is the way it is, especially in the medical community, when you have millions of young men in partnership with the government through the school system. The school system comes in and says, hey, well, your young man is not focusing in class very well. And he's got ADHD, or he's got this disorder, or he's got this problem. And the pharmaceutical company says, great, let's pump him full of medication. And the American Psychological Association is saying, well, we need to treat him more like a woman. And if we can do that and subdue this masculine side of him, then society will be better. But it's all driven through selfish pursuits, power and money, period.
Yeah.
That's it. Government, power. Academia, power. Pharmaceutical, medical industry, money, and the power that comes with it. It's all driven by that. And so you have to be very aware of where our information is coming from and what their motive is. And same thing with the family. The attack on the family, why? Because strong families with men at the helm, represent a threat to the powers that would otherwise be. And that's the bottom line.
Do you feel, Ryan, that power that they're after is, because I went back in history there to 1963 and the communist goals for America. Do you feel like it's, and this is a label, do you feel like it's a communist driven desire for power? I mean, is communism still kind of the enemy on this? Like what's the enemy we can define, and so that we can kind of like know when you're walking up to the plate, you want to know what pitches they have. It's easier if you can define it. So how would you define what is the source of this greed and power that we are fighting against?
Well, sure, communism, absolutely. But I'd go even far back, bigger than that. It's satanic. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's the devil.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. You're right.
And I know people are going to hear that and they're going to think what they're going to think and everything else. But this is the enemy working in so many different ways to ensure that we are enslaved to people, that we are sinning, that we are not in control of ourselves, that we are not acting righteously, that we are subjugated and enslaved, that we're fighting amongst ourselves. This is the enemy's work. It's supernatural. And we need to be aware. So is it communism? Yeah, for sure. And anything else that attacks the family, that attacks the individual, that tries to strip control, I would say individual sovereignty, personal responsibility and accountability, anything that dismisses that is a problem. And we need to be aware of it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. One video clip I want to play real quick to get your thoughts on, because this ties together the great battle of good and evil that's been going on from time immemorial, to politics, cultural Marxism, to the attack on men and boys in general. This one clip that was from last week, right before the midterms, kind of ties it all together.
It's day 222 of being a girl. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to the White House to speak to the President of the United States. Y'all are obviously wondering what I'm going to wear to meet the President. Here you go. It's the trans flag colors. Cute, right? Do you think I just knock on the front door? Let's go. Mr. President, this is my 221st day of publicly transitioning.
God love you.
Thank you. I am extremely privileged to live in a state that allows me access to the resources I need, and that decision is just between me and my doctors. Do you think states should have a right to ban gender-affirming health care?
I don't think any state or anybody should have the right to do that. As a moral question and as a legal question. I just think it's wrong.
Now, Ryan, I don't even know which question to start with. My problem is not as much with a person who's mentally deranged as it is with the Joe Biden entertaining it in the White House during a time when crime is, at record highs, inflation is at record highs, and that's what we're focusing on. I'm not trying to ask a political question, but I just think, man, it ties together so many things of what you're saying about it's all coming from the source of the enemy. What do you think when you see that clip?
I mean, one of the things, obviously there's so much to talk about here, but one of the things that really gets to me on this is this idea of gender affirming. Okay. What they're saying is that we need to affirm this behavior or this thought process. The problem is it's dangerous. It's dangerous to those individuals who are involved in it. It's because we know suicide rates, depression rate. We know those rates. It's dangerous. You're physically mutilating your body, and now you're encouraging other people, young minors, to even do that. And then you're telling them, oh, we're just affirming who you are. No, you're actually doing the exact opposite. You're doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And that's where I take issue. Look, if you're a man and you want to think that you're a woman or you want to dress like a woman, I mean, I think, okay, well, that's strange, but okay, put a dress on, sure, whatever.
Right.
Or vice versa. But now you're talking about sharing that message and normalizing that message to our young men and women. Why is it that so many young women are all of a sudden coming out or celebrating their new gender ideology? Is it because there's some biological thing happening? No, it's because it's cool.
100%.
That's it. We had the same thing, you know, when somebody would buy, like the cool guy on campus would buy a new pair of jeans, it's like, oh man, everybody's got to have those jeans now, right?
Right.
Or somebody got a new car, then all of a sudden it's like, well, I got to have that kind of car, I got to have that kind of phone, or I got to have those kind of nails, or I got to have this hat, or I got to like this sports team. It's the same phenomenon on a much more dangerous, clearly, scale.
Yeah, growing up, I never would have thought that the cool thing would have been that. It's unbelievable.
Right. And it is. I have people in my family that have participated in this, and it's unfortunate. And I know that most of these individuals are in a very dark place, and they have mental health issues. And if they don't have that, they clearly are going to be depressed, going to be anxious, going to be regretful if they go through any sort of physical surgery, and they are even going to be, unfortunately, very suicidal.
Do you think that Joe Biden believes what he's actually saying, or do you think he's just?
No. I mean, of course not. Of course not. What did he say in that clip? Is, oh, God bless you. Joe Biden doesn't care about.
Yeah, he's like,
that.
God love you. God love you.
God love you. That's what it was. Yeah, it's like Joe Biden doesn't care. I mean, think about those words. Like he just does not care. But it's important to his constituents, right? Well, I mean, God does love, right? He will love. Yeah. He does still love. Yeah. It's important to his constituents, and so he'll say that, and he'll entertain Dylan Mulvaney, I believe is who that was, and because it'll get him some points. But I don't think that he believes what he's saying, and if he does, why does it change so frequently and so often?
100%. With your own son, how old are your boys?
So I have a 14-year-old, almost 12. And then I have a 9-year-old girl, and then I have a 6-year-old boy.
Right.
Sorry, it's a little tricky sometimes. I got to get those ages
I
just
get confused with I got two boys. One just turned 6. The other one is 3, going to be 4 soon, but I get their ages wrong all the time, and I only have 2. That being said, part of the reason I stepped into this fight, Ryan, is because I know that, my boys are entering into this brave new world that we're going to leave them. And I want to be a part of shaping that, and I don't want to leave just an insane asylum for them and then wonder, well, like, Daddy, why didn't you get involved? Why didn't you do anything back when we were boys and you could have? So I stepped in. With your boys being a little bit older, and I don't know, are they in public school or private, or?
We homeschool our kids.
Homeschool. Okay. They would be for having our views. We're not going to be maybe lambasted as much because younger kids are just more likely to just say what they feel. But if our boys were to come out and say what we're saying about that, they would immediately be called bigots. It would be tough for them if they were in public schools, with their teachers, depending on who that could be. How would you recommend, or what kind of advice or guidance would you give to your son for holding the views that we hold about this whole thing that's going on?
Yeah, I mean, first you have to vocalize it, right? Because if you don't do it, somebody else will. So your narrative, and it is a narrative, it's your worldview. I'm not saying it's unequivocally true. Even my thoughts and the things that I'm sharing with you are not universally true necessarily. They're my opinions. I realize that. I know the difference between my opinion or perception and truth. A lot of people don't. They say it's my truth. No, it's your perception or your opinion. And that's okay. We can have truth with a capital T, or we can have opinion. And these are my opinions. It's my narrative. So God saw fit that I raise my kids. He put me in charge. He gave me authority, expressed authority to father my children, which means that my narrative, the things that I'm saying, need to be louder than the things that he's hearing or she is hearing in public school, maybe even in church, amongst their friends. My voice has to be the loudest. That's number one. Number two, we cannot address these things with our children on a surface level. We can't say, oh, that's bad, period. Because it's just not an argument. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that a child can stand. Grown adults can't stand on it. Because if I were to say something like, we need to work on helping people who are transgender be comfortable with who they actually are, which is biologically male or biologically women, I will get roasted for that. I probably will for just saying it on this conversation. Okay. And most people, most grown adults will cave and they'll waffle under that pressure, let alone children. So we have to have deeper conversations about why it's wrong, why it isn't good, what the alternative is, why the alternative is right, what path that leads us to, what path the other way leads us to. And we have to go deep into these conversations about transgenderism, homosexuality, sexual promiscuity, pornography, drug abuse, sex, like all these things that we don't want to talk about with our kids. We need to address at a very deep level, age appropriate, of course. You said you had a 3-4-year-old. Of course. Come on. Yeah. You're not going to get into everything, but at 6 years old, my youngest, my 6-year-old, he asked me where babies come from, right? So, okay, well, here's a conversation about anatomy. Here's a conversation about biology. He's capable of understanding some of those basic concepts. And I realized that it's not the birds and the bees talk. It's a series of conversations that we'll have over the next 12 years for him and longer. So yeah, we need to go really, really deep over a long period of time and be very vigilant in the way that we're talking about these. In fact, I have to have a conversation this afternoon with my son about some things. He's 14 and he's liking the young ladies, and my wife and I have come to the conclusion that there's some things that we've seen that we need to have a conversation with. I don't want to have that conversation. I got a thousand other things I'd rather do than that.
Right.
And yet God gave me the authority. He said, you're going to father those children. You better do it right, because you're going to stand and be held accountable for it one day. And so, gosh dang, we're going to have that conversation.
That's good. Yeah. And I believe the first thing you said is extremely important, which the step one is to just talk about it. And I think even on a broader scale than fathers with their kids talking about things is in our communities as well. I think a lot of people that hold to traditional views, like ourselves, have been too quiet, and therefore the other side screams louder and louder. And you think, well, that's the only voices out there, when it's really not. And to your point about age appropriate, I'll tell you, I was just walking through a Target bookstore in the children's section the other day, or just the book section at Target. And the world is after our kids from like age 0 to 3. I mean, I was seeing books like B is for Binary and When Sally Became Harry, like all for like little kids. And very few boys, by the way, on the covers as heroes, almost all minority females. Like that's almost all that it was. But the world is after our kids, and it's almost pushing us to have these conversations sooner than we would normally like to. And I don't love that, but I mean, they are just after our kids. I think they want to indoctrinate.
It's not even, I think, I mean, we're talking about opinion and truth. That's right. Truth, right? Yeah. It's clear through the public school curriculum, through the books that we see. It's clear that, and it is an indoctrination. And sometimes people will say the same thing about what I'm doing is like, well, aren't you indoctrinating your children? Yes, because it's a doctrine I'm teaching my children. The difference is I have responsibility for my children and I have the authority to do it. That's the difference. You don't.
Right.
You think you do. I mean, think about all these school districts and these school boards that believe that parents should not be involved in their children's education. These are vile, disgusting people who believe they have authority over my children. They don't. I might lend it to them. right? I might send my kids to public school in hopes that they will teach my children what they need to learn. But gone are the days where we can rest on hoping that these people have our kids' best interest at heart. So you better be vigilant, you better be aware, and you better be involved in these organizations too. You better be involved in PTA. You better be on your school board. You better be running for office. You better be coaching your son's little league team. You better be vetting your daughter's dance instructors. I'm using, of course, stereotypes there, but you get the point. You better be involved. And by the way, let's take coaching, for example. I'm sure you had some amazing, amazing coaches. You had a great baseball career. I'm sure throughout the time that you were 5, 6 years old, you were playing baseball. You probably had some great coaches along the way. Do you know how many of your teammates didn't have a permanent father figure in their life? Probably a large percentage of them.
Yeah, several. Many.
And the coach that stepped up when he didn't have to might have been the only father type figure or the dominant male presence in that young boy's life. And so when I'm coaching my kids' teams, and I haven't for a while, that's a commitment that I've made moving into 2023, is to coach more, because I used to do that a lot and I kind of fell by the wayside. We're going to be playing baseball and we're going to be playing football, but we're actually doing life together. And it's not about base running fundamentals. It's not about perfecting your swing. Sure, it is, but that's all a metaphor for how you're going to do life. And it's my responsibility to help educate these kids in life using baseball and football as the medium for it.
Yes, 100%. A big question I have, it may be the most important question that I have for you, because I'm wanting to change culture as much as I can. I know you want to as well. It's super important to be focused on our own kids, where God has ordained us as, the parent. But beyond that, how can this message of empowering men and encouraging positive masculine traits become part of the mainstream message again, or can it?
Yeah, it can. It can, and it should. It has to. I thought a lot about this question because I get these questions a lot. What can I do? What can I do? What can we do? And it's a great question. It's an important question. Here's what I would say. Give men responsibility. We thrive on responsibility as men. We want it. We're built for it. We want to put the rocks in the pack and carry it up the mountain. That's what we want to do. So when somebody comes to you, or maybe they don't, and you want to help a man, then I would suggest to you, here's the responsibility I would give to you. Start a book club. Like, go buy Masculinity Manifesto or Sovereignty, which is a book I wrote several years ago. Just buy the book. Buy 10 books if you have the means to do it, and get 10 of your buddies and do a book club. If in your church congregation there's no men's organizations or it's weak, then get involved. And here's my challenge to you. The responsibility is to put something together every single week where you go out and you do something physical together as a congregation of men. Or the responsibility, if you're coaching a team like I suggest, then your responsibility now is to enlist another man to be your assistant coach. So you get on the phone with every one of those parents and you get 1 or 2 assistant coaches that are men, and you say, I need you to be involved. I need help here. These young men on our team need help. And they're going to say, I don't know anything about baseball. I don't have the time. I don't this, I don't that. And your responsibility is to say, none of that matters. What matters is that you're present and you're here and you help me and you learn along the way, and we can help raise these young men. We as men need to start calling other men into the fight. Like, it's not enough to say, here's a book to read. Here's a podcast to listen to. Here's a cool clip I found on online that I think you should listen to. That's not going to cut it. We need to enlist men in the actual fight. So what can you do to get other men involved? That's what you do. And if 100 people listen to this and they get 100 men involved, and they get 100, and they get 100, and they get 100, imagine how quickly all these men are engaged in their communities, engaged in their school districts, engaged in promulgating powerful information, putting content out into the world that's going to serve other people, writing books, starting podcasts. It's going to be millions and millions of people almost instantaneously get to work.
I love it. Yeah, because when I asked you about how do we make this mainstream again, you're not telling me here's how you change the APA or here's how you change CNN or the Biden administration. You're saying bloom where you're planted, go after the men that you already know and bring them into community and start working on this together. It's a very grassroots approach to push back on all that. And I mean, that you're right. I mean, I think that's the way that masculinity becomes cool again, is through very practical success, the practical successes that people can see. One thing that you talk about in the book is the lone wolf mentality and that kind of James Bond sort of approach that we were indoctrinated with, I guess, through the 60s, 70s, 80s. We've kind of gotten away from it now, where it's now more of a feminized indoctrination. But what do you see as I guess I already know the answer to this. The major downside of the lone wolf mentality is you're not getting in community. You're doing it alone. You're going to be weaker that way. You're not going to have, iron can't sharpen iron. So here's a deeper question. A lot of guys, and this includes myself, by the way, stick to that facade of a lone wolf mentality because they're hiding something. And we talked about addictions that plague men, alcohol, porn. It could be any number of things. And for that reason, they kind of stay away from community. Do you feel that those addictions, Ryan, are the root problem themselves, or do you think they're actually the symptom of something that's deeper that's going on in a man?
It's a way to sedate ourselves from deeper, more significant issues, usually insecurities like rejection or abandonment, or the feeling like you're an idiot, or that you're a weakling or a coward. It's usually these insecurities, and rather than shore them up, we sedate ourselves with porn, alcohol, drug abuse, whatever our flavor is, so we don't have to think about it. So, but here's what I would say. You're talking about the lone wolf mentality. We don't want to put ourselves out there because it exposes us. But any of these addictions, if that's what we're talking about, there's places you can go. Like there's AA meetings that you can go, and you're going to have 20, 50, 100 other people who don't think less of you because you're an alcoholic. They're like, no, I'm an alcoholic too, so let's work together and do this. The same is probably true of pornography. I think there's a website called Fight the New Drug that teaches that, but it's all built around a community that is working to overcome these challenges and these obstacles and these addictions. Like those communities are there. You just have to go. You have to put yourself there. And you don't have to be intimidated because everybody there is dealing with the same thing you are. It's not like you're the only one who is, and I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying I know what you think you are. It's not that you're the only one there who's not strong enough or too weak to overcome this addiction. Everybody's there for the same reason.
Right.
So, and look, here's the other thing. If you have the courage to share some of your hardships, and this was the catalyst for growth for Order of Man, if you have the courage to share some of your hardships among your closest confidants, your closest brothers, I promise you, a promise that those individuals are dealing with, have dealt with the same situation or something very similar, and they're hiding it just like you are. But if you, and this is what leaders do, decide to go first and put yourself out there and talk to your brothers about what you're dealing with, you're going to give them permission to do the exact same, which is what they need to be able to talk about it and come up with some solutions together.
Right. I bet you see that in Order of Man all the time. And
all the time.
And I want you for a minute to tell the guys watching about the Iron Council, about Order of Man, and the kind of void that those platforms fill.
Excuse me. Yeah, Order of Man is our movement we've been talking about. So I've got a podcast. We've got events that we do. We've got the website, social media profiles, all that stuff. The Iron Council is what I call our exclusive brotherhood. So this goes above and beyond social media. These are guys who are more committed to improving themselves. They're more committed to doing the work required to improve their lives. They're also committed to the other brothers in the Iron Council by holding them accountable to the actions that these other individuals identify. So, hey, you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. You did X and Y, but you didn't do Z. Explain yourself.
Yeah.
So it's powerful. This is the band of brothers, no longer a lone wolf. There's no hiding. Here's what you're going to do. Here's the guys you're going to work with. Here's how they're going to hold you accountable. And here's what you're going to do for them. And then we all get to work and start improving our lives. It's very, very powerful. That's the Iron Council.
Very cool. Is it a long-term commitment, 6 months? What does it look like?
No, you can come in. We open it up 4 times a year. We're going to open it up in December. If you go to orderofman.com/Iron Council, you can check it out, watch a video and see what it's all about. We're opening up in December. And yeah, you can come in for a month, or we have guys in there who've been there for 5 years. We have other guys who come in for a month or 6 months. Yeah, you're pulling it up now. Click on the top right there where it says the Iron Council. Yeah, there you go. We have guys that come in for a month and they feel like, they get what they want or what they need, and they leave. Sometimes they come back because they realize I need this more than I thought I did. So right. Yeah, it's whatever you're looking for. That's what it is.
Very cool. Well, Ryan, man, I've really appreciated you coming on today. Thank you so much for having this conversation. We do need to make masculinity cool again. And I love your approach. It's very personal. It's bloom where you're planted, work on your kids, your family, and the people in your community. Any final thoughts?
No, man, I just appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, men thrive on responsibility. So take responsibility. Like, don't just listen to this podcast and say, oh, that's pretty cool. Actually do something with it, and then give another man responsibility. You start doing that, we'll be unstoppable.
I love it. Ryan, thanks so much for coming on, brother.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
The timing of this Warrior program for me couldn't have been more spot on. And I love the name that Jeremy calls it, the Warrior Mind, Body, and Soul, because it really encompasses all of those things. From the mind standpoint, one of the things I love is that I'm surrounded by like-minded men who love the Lord, men who want to be good leaders, not only in their home, but also in the community for which they live, and who are willing to step up to the plate and say, hey, I want to take a place and be a voice and be that man in my community and for my family. I love the body part because getting in shape is so important. I felt sluggish for a while, and so since I've been in this program, it's like my mind's gotten more clear. My body is changing. I'm losing weight. I feel good. I feel better about myself, and I've got more energy. And so I love the aspect of this. And the workout program is something that is absolutely doable, which is one of the things I struggled with other programs, because going to the gym, just the timing of it. But this has been phenomenal, the way Jeremy lays out these programs. And then the soul part of it. It has really challenged me and pushed me in my relationship with God. And there's been an awakening of things that I've really kind of been asleep to, that I don't need to be asleep to as a godly man. There's things I need to grow in. And so this has really challenged me and pushed me and been a program that has really set me on a track that at this season in my life I've never been on, but I'm grateful to be on it, and I feel empowered. And like I said, I've got like-minded men there's some competition, so it's fun, and they're pushing me and I'm pushing them, and it couldn't be better. So if you are giving this any thought, don't give it any more thought. Embrace it, do it. You won't regret.